You've heard the name Picasso, right? Of course you have. But what if I told you the man who painted some of the most radical, world-changing images of the 20th century started out as a master of realism who was literally bored by his own perfection? Well, today we're going to get into how one artist managed to completely shatter reality itself.
We have to start with Picasso's own words, because this says it all. At 7 years old, he wasn't learning to draw, he was already a master. And this quote, it's not a brag. Not at all. It's more like a confession. He was already so good that it scared him. He had to spend the rest of his life trying to unlearn it, to get that clumsiness of a child back.
Okay, so this slide right here, this is the whole puzzle, isn't it? On the left, a painting he did as a teenager. It's flawless, it's traditional, it's something you'd expect from a 19th century master. Then on the right, you have what he became famous for. Reality just completely fractured and reassembled. So the big question that's going to drive this whole story is, how on earth do you get from A to B? What happened?
To really understand the revolutionary, you have to understand the prodigy first. His whole journey started with him mastering the very rules he would later dedicate his entire life to completely destroying.
This timeline is just staggering. Think about it. At 8 years old, he's already done with his first oil painting. By 14, he completely aces an art school entrance exam that was meant for adults, and he finishes it in a single day. And then, by 19, he sheds his dad's common last name Ruiz for his mother's more unique Picasso. He wasn't just becoming an artist, he was building a brand, a myth, right from the very beginning.
So let's follow him to Paris, because this is where things get really interesting. In Paris, Picasso's art stops being just about incredible skill and starts being about deep, powerful feelings. His real-life experiences, we're talking tragedy and love, they begin to bleed right onto the canvas.
In 1901, something devastating happened. Picasso's close friend Carlos Casamajamas took his own life. This event just plunged him into a deep depression, and his art went right down there with him. This is where his famous blue period comes from. And you gotta understand, he wasn't just choosing to paint in blue. It was like he was emotionally forced to. That color was the only way to capture the cold, deep sorrow he felt and saw all around him, in the beggars, the prisoners, all the lonely souls.
And then, almost as fast as it started, the darkness lifted. He moved into the bohemian neighborhood of Montmartre, he fell deeply in love with a model named Fernando Olivier, and his whole world just changed color. The cold blues gave way to these warm pinks and oranges of the Rose period. His subjects changed too. He went from painting outcasts to circus performers, acrobats, and clowns. Once again, his art was a mirror of his life.
But let's be real, Picasso was never going to be content just painting his emotions. He was still that bored kid, that prodigy, looking for a rule he hadn't broken yet. And he found the biggest one of them all, reality itself. This is a moment he stops being just a great painter and becomes an absolute revolutionary.
So how did he do it? This slide basically breaks down the recipe for what is arguably the most important painting of the 20th century. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was like a cocktail of different influences. He took the geometric shapes he saw in Cézanne's work, the stone-like faces from ancient Spanish sculptures he'd seen, and the raw, intense power of African masks he'd discovered. He threw it all together, and what came out was something the world had never, ever seen before.
And that something new had a name: Cubism. So what is it really? Well, to put it simply, it's about throwing out the idea of a single viewpoint. Why should you only paint a face from the front? You can see the front, the side, even the back all at the same time. You're not just painting an object anymore, you're painting the idea of the object from every angle you can possibly imagine, all at once.
And this quote right here, this is the key that unlocks everything. For centuries, art was all about how skillfully you could copy what your eye sees. Picasso just threw that whole rulebook out the window. He decided that art should show what the mind knows. He knew a face has two eyes, a nose, and a profile, so he painted them all, even if you couldn't see them all at once in real life. He was painting thought itself.
But this incredible new artistic language he invented, it wasn't just for fun portraits and still lifes. As the world started getting a lot darker in the 1930s, Picasso realized his art could be more than just revolutionary. It could actually be a weapon.
1937. Remember that year. The Spanish Civil War is tearing his home country apart. Picasso's living in Paris, and he's struggling with this huge commission for the World's Fair.
He has this massive, empty canvas, but no subject. History, though, was about to give him one, in the most brutal way imaginable. On April 26th, Nazi planes flying for the Spanish nationalist leader Franco just carpet-bombed the small, defenseless town of Guernica. It was one of the first times a civilian population had been targeted like that from the air. When Picasso heard the news, all his indecision just vanished. Fueled by pure white-hot rage, he started work on a colossal scale, and he finished the entire masterpiece in just over a month.
Now, Guernica is not a realistic picture of the bombing. Instead, Picasso used his cubist language, the broken bodies, the screaming faces, the symbols of the bull and the horse, to show the universal chaos and suffering of war. By taking away all the color, he made it look like a stark, urgent newspaper photograph. It's like a piece of evidence, testifying to a crime against all of humanity.
And his political commitment didn't stop there. After living through the horror of another world war, he became a dedicated pacifist. He joined the Communist Party, and in 1949 he created this incredibly simple drawing. This dove of peace. I mean, you know it, right? It became one of the most powerful and recognized symbols of the 20th century, an icon for peace movements all over the world.
So, you look back at a life that spanned 91 years and produced something like 50,000 works of art, which is just mind-blowing. What are the big takeaways? What can we actually learn from the man who broke reality? Well, here are a few things. First, you have to master the rules before you can break them. Picasso could only invent something as radical as Cubism because he had already perfected realism. Second, never ever stop reinventing yourself. Blue period, rose period, Cubism. He was never afraid to leave behind what made him famous to search for something totally new. Third, art has real power. It can be a witness to tragedy, like Guernica, and it can fight for peace. And finally, live with passion. His art was a direct, unfiltered reflection of his intense, and yeah, often chaotic, personal life.
Ultimately, Picasso's real legacy isn't just a single painting or a single style. It's the permission he gave to all the artists who came after him to see the world differently and to have the guts to show the rest of us what they see. He shattered the mirror of traditional art, and the question he kind of leaves behind for us is this: what's the next view that's just waiting to be shattered?